All right, we're going to start. We're going to wait on Ronnie Simpson to get here. This is Pete, by the way, and of course my friend Jerome Rand. We could wait for Ronnie, but I didn't want to skip out on having Jerome on because Jerome has his own fascinating life and story. He's been on the show before. He's a solo sailor and circumnavigated the world solo in his boat. And every time I have one of these guys, Rand, there's like you, there's Jerome Rand, there's Randall Reeves, right? And then there's this other veteran guy who uses solo sailing and sailing, like adventure sailing, as a means for dealing with PTSD. And when you and I talked, and when me and Randall talked, and when Randall and I talked together, like I get it. I get why like a guy like me could go out with you, and it would be akin to what we all dealt with like in combat because there's high pressure, it's rewarding, you're pushing yourself back past your normal bounds, and it's just a neat way to live. And so I thought we might spend just a few minutes here while we wait for Ronnie talking about what it means to solo sail, and why do you find yourself on the water all the time, and why don't you just get a regular damn job working for some corporation that will give you a sweet retirement gig.
Well, it's Pete, thanks again for having me for sure. It's actually kind of interesting because something came up. I was doing my last presentation a couple of days ago, and this one has to deal with this trip I went on this last fall where I got into a really ugly situation. Basically, long story short, big weather system near the Gulf Stream, counter current, the waves breaking as if they're breaking on a beach. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I try to convey to the audience was that there was about a 3 hour period where I'm looking out from my boat. I'm caught in this counter current. I know I need to get out of it. The breaking section of the waves are bigger than my boat. And so I'm
Wow.
seeing these thunderous booming waves just randomly sort of around the boat. And all I can do is keep sailing south to try and get out of this thing. And I had sort of that slow burn, life flashing before my eyes, all that sort of stuff. But one of the points that got brought up by an audience member was a comparison when you're in a situation like that and you're dealing with something that could be potentially life threatening. You can see it, it's there, and you're in this situation that you can't just run away from. And they compared it to what it must be like to be in the battlefield and be in that situation where the reality of life and death is right there staring you in the face, and there's nothing you can do to just make it stop. You're just stuck in it. And one of the things that I faced in the many months after this voyage was sort of dealing with that trauma that I experienced, not only from the wave that the night before turned me upside down and broke a bunch of stuff off the boat, but then sort of being in that situation, that 3 hour chunk of time where the ocean was more violent and more angry than I'd ever seen it in my life, and sort of being stuck in that and trying to sort of deal with that. Um, it's definitely been tough. I was lucky to have some help from some people that have dealt with that and have worked with people with their own PTSD or for other people who have it. And yeah, it's I don't know. It's just a crazy comparison. I'd never thought about going out to sea having anything to do with something as hardcore as going into a war zone or being in the front lines and such. And luckily, I don't have any experience in that, but I think there are some pretty interesting comparisons there.
Yeah, the when we were talking, well, when you and I talked, I know for sure I asked you this, and I asked Randall the same thing. I always have to slow down because Jerome Rand and Randall Reeves, But I asked you guys like, how many times did you look out and go, "Ooh, I may die right now"? And you guys both kind of laugh, and you're like, and independently, you're like, a number of times, because you had the one wave that I think maybe rolled your boat and twisted it, and you're like, not only did it twist it, it infected my boat ultimately with a mold or something, if I remember correctly. And you're like, I can't get rid of this stupid mold now, and so you and your you and your boat have to deal with that reality as well. And you really are by yourself. Your water pump breaks, and so you can't
Yeah.
make fresh water, and all these things that are these challenges that push you and push you and push you closer to what survival looks like, and it does create damage, but it also creates life.
That's true. It's true. It creates those experiences, and I do firmly believe that when you are learning about yourself, not only sort of what you're made of, but just what sort of character you have, it takes being stuck in those sort of conditions and those sort of environments to truly bring it out. I always tell people one of the really interesting parts about sailing, and people have it all in their lives in different aspects, but it's that you're in that 100% committed because there is no pause button, there's no stop button. Even if you called for rescue from the Coast Guard, it's still going to be a long time before anybody gets out to you.
Hmm.
And it's when you're in those situations and there is no exit strategy, that's when you really get tested, because you have to face whatever you're facing head on. And from my own experiences, I found that people rise to the occasion. I think we have something inherent in us as people, as human beings, that when really pushed and when put into a corner, we will fight and fight and fight.
Yeah, yeah. Randall talked about, and this goes back to this kind of combat thing. Randall talked about, being overtired. You don't have enough sleep, and when you can get sleep, you must get sleep because you may not get it for 30 hours again. And having something happen at the front of the boat, and what you're supposed to do by the book is walk, clip in, walk up, clip in, walk up, clip in. He's like, no time for that. I'm too tired. I have to fix this immediately because I'm in peril and I don't have the time to do everything by the book. And so I rush to the front, I fix the problem, I come back and I get back to trying to get rest because I'm out. I don't have enough of anything. Right. And so safety, there's two ways to talk about safety, and I always laugh about this because you'll see like folks in garrison, folks back in the rear, they'll say there's always time for safety. You can also go, there's always time for safety. Like you can look at it two different ways, and that's not to make light of that kind of an approach, but sometimes the mission comes first, right? And if you wanted to be safe, you wouldn't be in the middle of the ocean by yourself, and so you have to weigh these things. And so it sounds insane to not take that precaution of clipping in when you're by yourself in the ocean. He's like, I got these stringers going off the back. I don't remember him telling us about this. He had
Yeah,
these
oh yeah.
stringers going off the back of the boat that, hey, I have a chance if I have enough energy, if I catch this thing to maybe haul myself back in the boat. But ultimately, I just don't let go. I go deal with the problem, I fix it, and then I go back down below and I try to get some rest. That kind of a reality doesn't make sense, again, in the boardroom. But when you're living on the edge, there is life in that. And then it's tough to go back to that boardroom and sit in a chair. It's okay to stand in front of the boardroom and say, this is why I did this thing. But to sit in that chair and have someone say, where's your report? You're like, I can't take you seriously,
Yeah, yeah, right. I'll tell you, when you do go out there and you go through some of these big storms and events like that out on the ocean, it always is a complete reset as far as your perspective on just everyday life. And I can always remember getting back and seeing people very fussed about seemingly the littlest things. Oh, I couldn't find a parking space, and they're flustered and they're angry about it, and I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, if that's the worst of your problems, man, you got it great.
Yeah.
Enjoy. And I don't know, I always think a reset like that's a pretty healthy thing, because it does eventually wear off. When on land, it's you tend to sort of ease back into things, and I do definitely myself, but then I get a nice dose of reality back out on that ocean.
There is a balance between, it's like when I would deploy all the time, I would realize I was living like I was the subject of Desperado, the song, like nothing was high enough, nothing was, there was no lows. It was just life, and I'm like, man, I've got to slow down and get back to where there was sweetness in life, and so you can harden yourself a little bit too much. And so you do need to go back and get a little softer because that is also part of it, right? Like you can't live too much on the extremes.
Well, and yeah, let me ask you that. Isn't that something that does happen in military service, where guys that will go in there and they'll do a couple of tours and they find that they go back and life is just not, they almost depend on going back and putting themselves in that danger.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could sort of see that for me, although I don't see when I go out sailing, I'm expecting, yeah, I'm going to see some bad weather, but I don't see it as life threatening. I guess to a pointy end that going to a place like Afghanistan or Iraq or something like that would be. But the possibility is there, I suppose. But
Yeah. The thing too, it's not just like I like the Hurt Locker, right? Like it's not just that you can't get like it's not an adventure sport. It's not an action sport. There is some of that in it, but it's also like you don't want to let someone down.
yeah,
Like if not me, then who? And then why not me? And so you want to put yourself in that spot so someone else can have it's a sacrifice as well and you can latch on to that and like hey that guy just had a baby, you know what, I'll go or whatever it is, right? Whatever that thing is, you can always put yourself in that spot where you end up going and then you just overdo it. I was just talking with this guy named Drago who was a SEAL, and a lot of SEALs have trouble with this where they want to come home and they want to have a family. They have a family, but then it's like, well, shoot, how do I get a job? And then the next thing you know, they take a contract gig and they're working in the Persian Gulf securing convoys. It's a
right.
sniper rifle and it pays great. And they can go do nothing for 6 months. And so they spend 3 months doing nothing. And then all of a sudden money gets short and they don't get a job. And they're like, damn, I got to go leave for another 9 months to go do this job that I don't want to. And so you get caught in this cycle of that's how you make your money. And it becomes okay. But it also, the next thing you know, you don't have a family because your family leaves because you're not there. And so you have
Yeah.
these cyclical problems. And I imagine this would relate to you. You're like, oh, here's the next best thing. Like, oh man, here comes this race. Or, ooh, I've been wanting to, go sail to whatever, Tahiti. And I now have the $2,000 to do it or whatever it takes. I have no idea. And so why not just go do this? And so you get a little FOMO-ish. And so
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, my buddy's going to go do this gig. Man, I'd love to go, but, and it's another this, and I'll have my house halfway paid off. You know what? I'll go spend these next 2 months doing it. And then, honey, I swear I'm going to come home and we're going to.
No, those are definitely thoughts that run through my head quite often. Where I'm 44 years old, so I'm getting to an age where the idea of actually having like a little house or a piece of land or something that start growing a little bit of roots somewhere would be nice because I mean outside of the ocean, boat yards have been my home and marinas, and it's a very transient sort of lifestyle. Um, but also my current girlfriend now, all she wants to do is go and have me sail her down to the Caribbean and go explore down there. So people sort of egg me on to keep sailing, and obviously everybody at most presentations that I do, the first questions that's asked is, "What's next? What's the next big adventure?" And
Right,
and I think that leads into the FOMO a little bit, where I'm sort of like, "Yeah, I guess I should go on another one, right? The
right.
last one might have almost cost my life, but." That's what I do, and I don't know. I'm very cognizant that I think there's always a time in an adventurer's sort of life where you make the transition from creating the experiences and doing those things to then sharing those experiences and teaching and all that the next
Yeah,
generation. And I had a guy tell me that after this last trip, he said, "Well, look on the bright side. It's like the deck got reshuffled for you. You made it
yeah,
around the world without a huge amount of drama." Um, well, relatively, I suppose. And so the deck was kind of stacked against you for a while, and it finally caught up with you. And you want to leave the casino when you're up. You don't want to go broke out there. And for me, going broke out on the water would be not coming back. So I'm
yeah.
hoping to make the right choice at the right time.
How dangerous is it? I mean, how many people like you, and I'm not necessarily just solo, but people who are like, I'm going to do something that is, dangerous enough that like, oh, I can expect that one day if I keep doing this, it's like skydiving, right? Like at some point you can run out of luck. Base jumping, there is a number, right? Like I am
Hmm.
past 800 jumps, you know, it's always this number, and I am past that number, and I probably will be fine. But I know better. Like there are certain numbers, right? So how dangerous is it?
That honestly, I think with the ocean, there is a certain amount of there's a degree of danger depending on where you're actually trying to sail. Now,
Right.
the North Atlantic in the deep fall is now, they say it's no joke, and it
Hmm.
definitely isn't. That's where the perfect storm happened. That's where countless amounts of, wintertime hurricanes essentially are rolling around. The Southern Ocean, obviously, that's another one. That was kind of the funny thing on this last trip is outside of just the first week or so, it was going to be a trade wind sail, me kicking back, with a cocktail at sunset, reading books through the night,
Yeah.
80-degree weather and 15-knot breezes. And boy, was I wrong. But there's always going to be an inherent risk, especially if you go solo sailing
Right.
out, offshore. But there are a lot of pieces of gear that I think make it quote unquote safe to go out there.
Mm.
Alarm systems for ships, things like that. You've got solar panels to back up,
Right.
your engine to charge the batteries to keep all that safety stuff going. But I'm of the ilk that if you're going to put yourself out there and you make you make that decision to do that, you better think twice before you call somebody to come and help you, because anybody that has to venture out there to find
Yeah.
you is putting
Yeah.
themselves at risk for you. And that's something that I take very seriously. And I think anybody who's a solo sailor, probably it crosses their mind that, unless you're in some organized race, if you hit that button, you're putting somebody else's life at risk, and you
Right.
really should be thinking about that pretty hard.
Yeah, that was one of the things from the whole Titan effort. One of the guys that had been on the Titan before, he said, "Hey, nobody who's coming has paid, it's going to get paid a $250,000 like what we paid to go on this thing, and so they shouldn't come. Like that's not their job. We paid, we took a risk, we knew the thing was experimental, and he didn't feel comfortable with people going to do it. Now, look, they're still going to go do it. It's an international effort and everything else, but he had a very similar thought. It's like it's not appropriate to push people and resources to the bottom of the ocean, to the middle of the ocean to go and deal with this problem, and ultimately
Yeah.
it didn't matter. But at that time when he was talking about that, we didn't know, and if you had to do a deep sea rescue, he's like, "Mm, I'm not cool with that."
Yeah. Oh, I mean, well, and just, I mean, even yeah, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, the amount of risk that you're putting in. I would think it'd be very different, if you have deep sea divers or, I forget the term for it, but the guys that like work down there at those depths on the
Yeah.
oil platforms and things. Well, then
Yeah.
obviously, yes, they have these safety guidelines and all that stuff, and a
Right.
huge amount of resources to help those people. But I mean, if you're essentially on a tourist trip
Yeah.
down to the Titanic, that's a bit of a
Yeah.
different story. You're putting yourself at pretty good risk, though.
Yeah.
Sometimes
You,
we get what we pay for.
it's not exactly a comparison, but I think it's similar, enough to make it like a lot of criticism. And look, we haven't seen the whole investigation on that craft and everything else, but there's a lot of weight thrown at the company because they were taking something experimental that the community was uncomfortable with. But your boat is highly customized. You get into the racing world and people go out in Bonneville and they're like, this is how I'm going to build it, built it myself, forged my own pistons. I'm going to put a rocket on the back of my car. And there are certain ways to do it, and I'm not doing it that way. I'm doing it this way. I've done the math, and it's going to work. And then sometimes those people die. And so on the edge of these things that are already edgy, and we were talking on the way up to the mountains here where we are right now about free divers. They are on the edge of
Oh,
what is possible, right?
yeah.
And so, yes, they look crazy, but in their world, like they're past what we all think is possible. But for where they're at, that's the frontier, and you have to go beyond the frontier. So I can understand why when you develop something, and I don't care what kind of controller you use, that's drive by wire, whatever. We look at that and think it's a joke because it's got a controller, but that's how experimentation works. You do something that's outside the bounds of normal. Was it reckless? I guess we'll find out. But your boat isn't a custom boat. Your boat is specifically designed what you want to do what you want to do with it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I mean, I've done my own modifications on it and beefed it up even more than what it was originally designed spec wise. But that's after decades of people breaking things and finding weaknesses and things like that in it. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I chose that boat specifically because of its reputation as a really, really hardy vessel. Now, no vessel ever built on this planet can ever withstand what the ocean can throw at it.
Right.
But luckily for us, it's perfect. The perfect storm is few and far between. Outside of
Yeah.
hurricane season, so
Yeah.
it's one of those things where if you sort of play it smart, but every once in a while you're going to get caught out, and that's where having a boat like Mighty Sparrow
Yeah.
really helps because I can put quite a bit of faith in it. I mean, in 2022, when I went through the eye of Tropical Storm Wanda, which was an experience that I hope I never have to relive, but I'm actually really glad I did it. It was
Yeah.
really the most amazing part was that it went from blowing about 50 knots, so just really heavy winds howling through the rigging. I'm just hove to, and I'm just holding my position in the storm. And then suddenly the eye wall came right over, and there was no wind at all. And the
Yeah.
sails are just flapping. We're rocking and rolling. And I go up on deck, and I can see the stars because it always happens at night. Always
Yeah.
happens at night. And it
Yeah.
only lasted 15 or 20 minutes. And then the other side of the wall hit, and the winds cranked right back up. And
Right back to it.
yeah, it was just I had this semblance. I was like, man, I wonder if there's a satellite up there taking a picture down here because I'd be that little dot right in the middle of this big bad
Yeah.
storm. But
And how many people
uh,
have ever experienced that, like out of all of the people and ever, there's
quite
only so many.
I only know of one gentleman who's John Kretschmer, and he's probably the greatest heavy weather sailing captain in America.
Wow.
People pay him to hop on his boat in the fall and winter and go across the Atlantic and experience heavy weather under sort of the best supervision around. And
Yeah.
John and I've only texted with him a few times, but one day I'll have him on my podcast. He is
Yeah.
literally a legend, and he's a great author. But he's blundered his way into a couple of hurricanes, and I think he's been through the eye wall on a couple of occasions. And the way he describes it is, yeah, it's pretty spot on. I believe him 100%.
Yeah, and I guess like maybe an airplane will go through every now and then, and probably on purpose because they're doing something weather related. And I'm sure for them, that's terrifying. But you're actually in the hurricane
I'm
on
in
the
it,
water.
yeah. Oh yeah, no, those I think it's the Hercules or something like that they
Yeah.
fly through those, and
Yeah.
as uncomfortable as it is when they do that, those planes are built to be able to just handle all that wind,
Hmm.
and they go right through it. And oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that must be incredible to actually fly through the eye of a hurricane because it is. I mean, you're going through complete dense cloud cover, rain, lightning, whatever, and then you are
Yeah.
opened up right into the sunshine.
Yeah. I know I flew on a medevac flight, probably a similar form factor plane, but different configuration in terms of like what's inside of it. And man, we had turbulence, and you have all these guys who are in various stages of blowing up, and it was like boom, 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 and you just like boom, ah,
Yeah.
boom, oh, boom, and I mean, I'm talking hospital beds with like bubbling, fluids and everything else, and
Oh,
it
jeez.
smelled like wounded people, and you're just like, it was horrible. But these guys had to get back, and I'm like, I'm never taking a medevac flight back again. I'm
Oh my
pretty
gosh.
resilient, but I'm like these poor guys, man. Oh, it was terrible. But we took a beating, and imagine like way worse than that to get through a hurricane. It must just be. I mean, they must fall and climb nonstop as they go through those clouds. It's got to
Oh,
be
all
crazy.
that wind shear. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
1 minute you're falling 300 feet, the next minute you're getting boosted up. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
think I have it bad when I'm in 30-foot waves and I'm going up and down that
You do,
much, but
you do,
jeez.
you do have it bad. The that sphere in Vegas, that thing's 366 feet high, and it's enormous. Like you can see like a light pole next to it is like just this little tiny thing, and so you're going 36 feet up, like you know that's a tenth of that, but you're in a little tiny boat. Like when you
Yeah.
think about being in the ocean and you're floating in the ocean, it's just your head. You're a coconut like just floating. You're so small, and all of a sudden 36 feet is unfathomable. It's like a
Oh
building,
yeah.
you know? Yeah,
Well,
it's
and
crazy.
when you're looking at those waves come at you, you're riding away from them. Your vantage point. They say when you're watching waves on video taken from the deck of a boat, you should double the size of the wave you think you see. If
Hmm.
you're actually on the boat, you should cut it in half because you're just way too involved in what's going on. And it's true. I mean, there's
Yeah.
times where I'm looking and I'm like, that wave had to be 50 feet. And
Hmm.
no, it's more like 25, but it
Yeah.
sure doesn't feel that small when you're out
Yeah.
there.
It's like the green monster flowing at you, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, here comes this thing. And sometimes almost as vertical, right? It's it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you something along those lines too on the storm thing. I lost my thought. Either way, the uh the whole world of doing that, like when you think about Randall and going around Antarctica, when I tell people who know about sailing, they're like, he didn't do that. And I'm like, he did. And they always say, how far south was he? Because it's illegal to go. And I'm like, all I know is that he did that. And there's only so far south you can be because there's not that much south down there. And like you're
Yeah.
just you're just down there. And they're like, how did he do that? And I'm like, around. I don't know. Like he just did
It's
it.
hard. It's hard to picture unless you have a globe in your
Yeah.
pocket. And I have thought about that when I go to presentations, having a blow up one or something just for a visual
Right.
aid. But yeah, once you get down, the three wind belts for sailing around the world are the furious or the roaring 40s, so the 40-degree south
Uh-huh.
longitude or latitude, and then you have the furious 50s and the screaming 60s, and that has to do with the
Mm.
ferocity of these winds and storms that you have. But essentially, to get underneath Africa, you need to be down at about 37 degrees south, but normally you go
Mhm.
much further. To get underneath Australia and New Zealand, you're down to 45 to 46 degrees south. But Cape Horn is the big one. To
Mm.
get south of Cape Horn, I believe it's 57 degrees south latitude. So you're deep in the furious 50s. And the tip of Antarctica is closest there. And then there's like a peninsula that comes off. You're only maybe 500 miles away from it, I think. So
Yeah.
you're way down there. And yeah, that Southern Ocean is it's a tremendously empty, isolating, cold, unforgiving place. And
Yeah.
you go too far south and you start seeing icebergs, and yeah, actually, there's a counter current that runs against the prevailing winds down there as you get really close to Antarctica.
Wow.
It's kind of an interesting place because not everybody goes the easy way like Randall and I did. Sometimes people
Easy
battle
way.
against going from east to west against the westerly the winds down there. So hats off to them because they're beating into the storm while Randall and I are riding with it.
Yeah. My buddy Brian is he's a rowing guy. He rowed across the Atlantic and he's like, I'm never doing that again. And of course he was lying because anybody who does these kind of things, I'm like,
We
there's no
always do
way.
it again.
Yeah.
Always.
And so he's like, all right, I'm going to do it again. That's how he talks. He's from Boston. And he's like, but I'm going to make it different. And I'm like, you're going to make it harder, aren't you? He's like, yeah, I'm going to make it harder. He's going to row from Boston to London. And I'm like, you are a moron. I don't know
Oh,
why you do it.
jeez.
So, and I'm like, how are you going to do this? And he's like, we're going to have to wear dry suits because it's
Yeah.
too dangerous to not do it. And so they're going to row in dry suits. And I think they're doing it in the summer and they have to do it like lickety split, like in a
Oh
month,
yeah. It's
you
got to be
know?
done in July. That's
Yeah,
the statistically the calmest month in the North
yeah,
Atlantic. It'd be
yeah.
interesting to see what their route is because when you get further away from the equator, you start doing a great circle route. So
Hmm.
vast distances, all the airplanes and stuff, like the transatlantics, they go up over like Greenland to get
Yeah,
over there. And
yeah.
sailing and rowing across oceans is the same. The only other thing though, with from Boston over there, you do have the Gulf Stream current. And as
Hmm.
nasty as that place can be, it was the reason that, way back in the day before they even knew it was there, because it was Benjamin Franklin that I think first started tracking it.
Yeah.
The ships from the US going back to England were twice as fast as the English
Hmm.
coming back to us. And, it was a big point of pride for a long time. I mean, we were just like, we're better sailors.
Yeah, the have you ever heard about the first purposeful east to west crossing of the Pacific back in the age of discovery? It's
East to
called
west
the
across the Pacific.
Yeah, it's in the 1500s. It was called the Vuleta, and the Spanish and the Portuguese were battling on back before they knew all the longitude and everything, like who owned the back half of the planet, the
Mhm.
Spice Islands and all that stuff. Yeah, and so they took this little armada out from Mexico, and they went out to the Philippines and all those kind of places in Japan, and they were going to get rid of the extra ships and just leave them there, and then they had one they were going to bring back. Well, as soon as they left, they ran into storms and everybody got scattered. And obviously, if you're off the horizon, there's no signaling. And so they would
Yeah.
do things. This is how they communicated. They would bury a bottle under a tree, and they're like, if you happen to go to that island and get off and you're like, hey, someone buried a bottle here, and then that's how they would communicate once they lost
Jeez.
comms and leave like a message with people. And so once you do that, all the scuttlebutt starts and they start talking about each other, and so they decide like who did what to who, even though they're not communicating at all.
Yeah.
And so one of the ships that was not at all intended to go back, it was like a really low draft, low supplied ship, was the one that happened to get blown off course, and then it got to the point of no return, and it ended up coming back, and it had just no provisions at all. And it's the craziest story ever. I'll put a link up here for the story.
Yeah. Oh, please do.
It's
I
wild, man.
love those kind of stories, like the story of the whale ship Essex. Unbelievable. In the Heart of the Sea by
Yeah.
oh, I can't remember the author's name, Nathaniel something or other.
Mm,
Man, it's horrific what happened to those
yeah.
guys. And I mean, there's so many crazy stories and situations of, I mean, talk about testing the limits of survival. When you're out in the ocean, that environment is so foreign to us, it might as well be outer space. We're just without a
Yeah.
ship or without something to float on, there's just nothing we can do. We
Yeah.
can't live in that environment. And the fact that at any point that ship can sink adds that element of risk to it. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. It's crazy. And the thing is these guys almost died several times, and then a storm hits them at Mexico when they're just about to land, and they promise God that they're going to, go to the shrine and everything else, and they make it, and then because of all the scuttlebutt, they decide to hang the guy who piloted the ship,
Oh,
because like he had abandoned the mission, and he's like, I didn't abandon the damn mission. I mean, like this storm. Did you guys not get hit by storms? I got hit by. But yeah, man, it's a crazy book. They had this guy Andreas Resendez wrote the book about it, and this is all from everybody's logs because you're working for the king, right? So you're a
yeah.
contract employee, so everybody's got to annotate everything, and so he writes from all of the original logs. This incredible, incredible thing. So I'll write this down. But anyhow, so it's just this great, great, great story. I'll write all of this down here and put it in the links for everybody to check out. But yeah, just an incredible story. I'm going to do this. What are you working on right now?
Right now, at this point, I've been up here in Michigan for the summer, and one of the sort of side things that I've been trying to do is work out this new presentation about this voyage this past fall, and getting turned over, losing all the safety equipment, and then having to find my way back, and sort of dealing with the mental aspects of sort of that near death experience, mixed in with a really good dose of sleep deprivation. And I was only out for 25 days, but in those
Hmm.
25 days I think I was tested and challenged almost more than any of the other voyages. Going around the world is an endurance event that is up there with the best of them for sure, because I mean, 9 months, that's
Yeah,
quite a long time. But this one was just it was of a different breed as far as the extremes that I was having to go, and also the amount of mental sort of practice, and I found all of these little aspects, just for example, um, I had my GoPro camera, and normally I like to take a little bit of footage on the voyages. I'd come back, blah blah blah, put it on YouTube or use it in a presentation. presentation. I videoed maybe 5 times more than I ever did on any other trip, and what I
Hmm.
found was that just by having that camera there and turning that on, it forced me to sort of pull myself together a little bit. Stop
Mm.
being the sleep deprived, kind of weirdo on the boat, and let's get a little serious so that I can present myself in such a way. Because even though you're just talking into a camera, there's kind of this feeling like you're almost talking to a person. And
Mm.
there were a lot of little things like that that sort of helped me along the way and sort of nursed me back to getting back to port safely after all the events. Because the knockdown happened on the seventh day, and then it was another 18 days before I was able to return. And in that time, we went through 5 different weather systems before the ocean sort of calmed down.
Mm.
Those kind of distracted me a little bit from having to deal with what was going on in my head. But
Yeah.
once the weather calmed down and then it's just me and the ocean and there's no big challenges, that's when all the thoughts and memories and everything started creeping in. So there was a
Mm.
lot of sort of mental workouts, I guess you'll say,
Yeah.
to be able to sort of keep my head on straight, because I've dealt with being alone and being out at sea long enough to know that I have a pretty good head on my shoulders as far as controlling what's going on. But this time, what I ran into was this sort of scary situation where sleep deprivation can almost make it harder to sleep. Your
Yeah.
brain starts, your body's exhausted, but your brain, for whatever reason, almost goes into like a panic mode. And every time you lay your head down on that pillow, no matter it's been 40 hours since you've slept, your brain cannot stop turning, and it
Right.
starts popping up all these bad ideas and these bad things and these memories.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm not going to sleep now. So you're up late. And it's this snowball effect, which unfortunately in real life has taken plenty of sailors, where they go out and they can't sleep, and then all of a sudden they're relaying messages that don't make sense, and then suddenly there's no more messages, they go rescue and there's nobody there. So
Right.
I don't want to become one of those statistics, for sure. And this voyage, I think, was closer than almost any other,
Yeah.
in those respects. So it was a
Oof.
real challenge, obviously, but trying to relay all of the information and the things that I learned to the audience, and also keep them entertained. I have some pretty good one-liners in there as well, because some pretty funny stuff did happen
Yeah.
out there. I had like 6 dozen eggs on that boat, and I lost every single one of them in that
Oh,
knockdown. Oh yeah. And so there's some pretty good stuff. It's fun, it's animated, and it's really giving me a second chance to get back out there, because the pandemic and everything sort of crushed the old speaking tour right as it
hmm.
was just taking off. And so now it's sort of a second chance to get out there and just share my experiences with people. So this fall, I'm hitting the road, starting in Michigan, going to be on the East Coast by October, and just trying to book presentations pretty much for anywhere and everywhere I can, just to be able to keep sharing the stories.
I'm going to put your YouTube link on here for everybody to look at it. Just sailing into oblivion.
You
You just go
got
to
it.
YouTube and type that in, and you'll be able to see it. And a whole bunch of links have been put into all the sailing stuff. I think we've done on the show, which quite a lot, turns out, has been put in there. Actually, I think I missed one thing. Um, yeah, man, all that stuff and that well-being, and the thing I figured out from all of my combat time, and again, these things are so related because our
Yeah.
brains work in the same way. Is I have got to constantly maintain my mental well-being, and it can be pretty scary, and I can push myself pretty hard, but then I've got to slow down and rehabilitate and check myself. So, like for me personally, I have and this will sound a little bit shocking for people who don't know, but I have suicidal ideation every day. Today, it's in check and it's not a problem. I know I have it. It's like I'm going to sneeze. I'm not going to do anything crazy, but I know that every day these things, these feelings will come up, and I can monitor it and meter it, and I can deal with it. I've developed those tools. Um, will I always be able to do that? I don't know. There's too many people that lose that battle for me to say confidently no in 20 years or in 10 years or in 5 minutes. But but it's because I've worked hard to try to fight this thing that I've been able to, luckily for me right now, get on top of it. And it's if anybody out there has like a problem like that, like you can through repetition and hard work, and you treat it seriously, like this is for your survival. Um, I believe that you can find your own way to do it. I don't know that you can do it by yourself. Maybe some people can, but find your thing, whatever it is. For me, it's talking to this one therapist. If you're a therapist and you don't vibe, talk to that therapist and say, "Hey, this isn't working. What else can we try? Do we try something else?" And you know, we all have to do whatever it is that we have to do to get well, and we don't have to suffer, hopefully, and you can find your thing. So that's just my little PSA about what I have done and how I've dealt with some pretty significant, turns out pretty significant damage, and I've been able to calm down quite a bit through a lot of work and trials, and I'm a lot better of a person now because of it, you know?
Well, and yeah, I mean, taking care of your mental health and like you said, sort of keeping things in check. I That was one of the first calls that I made when I got back to land was to a friend of mine, Rob, out on the
Mm.
West Coast,
Hmm.
who has dealt with PTSD himself, and he's also worked with professionals that help others with it, both from combat situations and childhood trauma, things like that. And he talked to me for as long as it took, and he gave me all sorts of great advice, told me warning signs to look for. Because, when I first got back, normally the first thing I do is pop the laptop out and I start watching some of the footage, like, oh, that was a crazy day. I
Yeah.
turned on some of that stuff and I had to turn it off immediately. I
Oof.
couldn't handle watching it. It took me
Yeah.
probably 2 weeks before I didn't feel like I was just getting sucked right back into that situation. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I normally, as a solo sailor, a solo guy, I typically like to try and find all my own solutions. But
Yeah.
I think one of the things that this voyage taught me was that sometimes your brain can be playing tricks on you, and
Yeah.
whatever it takes, if it takes finding other people to talk to and get help, just do it, because you don't want to mess with it if you don't want to
Yeah.
suffer in silence, I guess
Yeah,
is
no,
what I'm
that's for
trying to
sure.
say.
Ronnie, once you get set up, turn your phone 90 degrees if you can. It'll give us a little better view of you overall.
Yeah,
Ronnie's,
I'm gonna hold on. I am gonna apologize massively. We've had like 27 things going on. We're trying to get out of here and go to Europe in a handful of days.
yeah, let me,
And
I'll
I,
just, yeah, you're good, man. Ronnie's getting ready to sail and he's trying to squeeze us in. So you get a pass, man. I'm like, do you want to wait? And he's like, no, we'll squeeze it in. So
dude, I
you
looked at
get,
my phone 10 minutes ago and it was 1:30. And I looked down right now and it's 3:40. And I was like, oh man, I just screwed that guy over. I feel so bad.
typical race driver. He's like, I'll be there on time. Well, that's
Well,
all right.
we have like, yeah, a bunch of things that were kind of supposed to be done. Like, I'm just putting my headphones on right now in a minute.
You're good. You're good.
I feel really bad, guys. I'm sorry.
That's all
I
right.
don't worry about it. I can remember the months leading up to my departure, and pretty much the last thing I ever wanted to do was anything but prepare that boat.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate. I didn't have any sponsors or anything like that. So I didn't really have to do too much. I can only imagine the amount of people that are pulling at your
Yeah.
arm right now.
You have
Jerome meet
no
Ronnie.
idea.
Ronnie meet Jerome.
What's up,
Jerome is
Jerome?
a solo sailor of the First Order. He's a badass as well. You guys, I'm going to shut up and let Jerome ask you some questions.
Right on, right on. I'm sure I have some questions to answer right now. Like, why are you 45 minutes late to this podcast?
It's all right. How you feeling? When do you take off, Ronnie?
The short answer to that is as soon as we're ready, as soon as is possible. I was originally hoping to get out of Maine about 5 days ago, but we've been working on the boat as fast as we can. We took on more projects than we originally anticipated, and but to answer your question, we're probably going to be leaving like next Wednesday, maybe. So maybe like 5 days from now, we're going to be leaving Portland, Maine, and sailing over to Spain for the start.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. When Pete told me about you, I started doing some digging, and I just had flashbacks to 2017. I prepared my boat for my solo nonstop in Rockland, Maine. And so
Wow.
just north, yeah, in a tiny boatyard, and essentially took off in October from Gloucester, Massachusetts, and it was 9 months. I was in a slow boat. You're going to do it a lot faster than I did. But
What kind of boat were you in?
I was in a West Sail 32.
And you went solo nonstop?
Solo nonstop. And you know what the name of my boat is?
No.
Mighty Sparrow.
Mighty Sparrow. Wow, that's a pretty crazy coincidence, actually.
Yeah. It's too funny. Two boats getting ready in Maine, and yeah, you're in for a treat, my friend. It's going to be one of the biggest challenges of your life, but it's going to be great. Absolutely great.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm really looking forward to it. So it's going to be a huge challenge, but I'm really looking forward to it. So, but we're not when we leave here, we're not leaving on the circumnavigation. When we leave here, we're just leaving to sail over to the start line for the race.
Which is what's the date of the start?
So my start is October 28th, but over in Spain.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So we're trying to get over there. Really. We're running a little bit later than we had really initially hoped, but like I said, we kind of took on more and more work than we initially intended to here in Maine. But it was sort of like, you know, while we're here, we might as well do as much work as we can here at the boatyard in Maine. It's a really, really good boatyard that we're at, Maine Yacht Center. And so, yeah, we're a little bit later than I had originally planned on getting over towards the start line, but yeah, it should be good. Actually, one of my buddies, there was another boat that was here, a class 40 with a guy named David Linger from Seattle. And he was here for the last year, really. The boat was hauled out all winter, but he's on his way over to Spain right now. He's about halfway. So, you know, a lot of the American boats are kind of based East Coast in New England, and they're all kind of headed over or getting ready to head over right now. So,
fantastic. How many Americans are competing in this?
There are currently 5, or there's currently 4 that are signed up. There's one more that is supposed to be signing up. So there should, in theory, be 5, but I have my doubts that all of those 5 will make it to the start line. So I think you'll probably see 3 or 4 Americans.
3 or 4. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy cow. I had the fortunate coincidence to sit down with Elliott Smith, who was the American entrant to the Golden Globe. And we sat down and chatted on my podcast. It was really, really interesting. But, you know, I did my trip as just I wanted to go do a voyage. You know, you're representing the United States. No American has ever won a solo nonstop race around the world. So pressure's on, my friend.
I mean, you know, it's I want to do as well as I can, and that's the cool thing about this race is no Americans have won a solo nonstop race, and I definitely feel like with this boat and the campaign that we've pulled together, I really feel like we've got a shot. So that's the cool thing. Sparrow is this race, the Global Solo Challenge. It's like a pursuit style race, so it's all staggered starts, and those staggered starts are all based on your IRC rating. And on IRC, Sparrow rates like a class 40 because she's a early 90s boat. She's way heavier than a class 40, not quite as much riding moment. She's a single rudder boat, and she's an old fiberglass boat, so she's not like she's a new canting keel carbon boat or anything. So again, she rates like a class 40, so I'll be racing against the class 40s. Basically, there's several open 40s and class 40s and myself, and then this other kind of oddball 65-foot boat that are all in the same start. So it should be really interesting. We'll be racing down the Atlantic with I think like 7 or 8 or 9 boats in my start, which should be really interesting. And I mean, I think, you know, Sparrow knows the way. She's been around the world 2.5 times. She's done 2 solo around the world races. She's been around Cape Horn 3 times. And, you know, I've got brand new sails. I've got brand new rigging. I've got a really solid boat. We've done a pretty good job of preparation. And we just did a really, really cool new charging system that's was a very involved installation. So we spent a little bit more time and money than I would have originally liked to spend on that project. But the result is that now we've got a really, really cool charging system that should be something that really works well around the world, I think. So I think in this race, I mean, someone's got to win this race, and like, why not me? You know, it's like I think we have a real shot. And I get, if you're in my shoes, that's all you can really ask for is to have a fair shot at winning this thing, and I think we have that. So
well, and the nice part too is, you know, even just completing the course, is a huge accomplishment. I mean, it's one of the greatest challenges in the world to make it around via sail through the Southern Ocean. And so my hat's off to anybody that even tries. You make it to the start line, even better, but you make that course. But if you win it on top and become the first American to do so, that will be awesome.
I mean, yeah, that would be the goal for me. The goal of this is I've had a lifelong through my adult life, I've had the goal of making it to the Vendée Globe, and I think this would be a great springboard for that. So as long as I can run a good campaign and hopefully make it around the course and tell a good story and hopefully connect with the American public. And if we have luck on our side and we finish nonstop and we're quick enough to be on the podium or in first place, that would be even better. But, one really cool thing about this race is that while it is a solo nonstop race, they do allow you to make stops and then still stay in the race. So you could.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you could stop. You could stop and then even still conceivably win the race. So the only real thing with that is that when you stop, you have to stay tied up for like 96 hours. So you're not allowed to just make that quick pit stop for food. There's a bit of a time penalty, a time consideration that comes into that. So, like I said, you can't just make a quick pit stop for food, or you can't meet someone in New Zealand on the dock and just throw a new code 0 on the boat. Like, you can't do that kind of stuff. But you can stop and work on your boat for 4 days, which would potentially enable you to finish a race that you otherwise might not have finished. Mm-hmm. So even if I am not able to go nonstop, I could be like an official finisher of the race and get that solo circumnavigation and hopefully still get a good result and achieve the ultimate goal. So
excellent.
What do you put your odds at in terms of like finishing finishing nonstop and then getting a podium? What do you think? Like, legitimately, where you at?
I have no clue. I mean, that's such a hard.
Come on,
a hard number for me to...
legitimately, like 50-50, 20%. I mean, it's. I know you're throwing a dart, but throw it.
I would like to think I have a way higher than 50% shot of finishing the course.
Okay.
Finishing like, I wouldn't be surprised if we're like, oh, we had a really big problem with that system and I just had to stop in New Zealand and we had to fix it and we didn't go nonstop. But I mean, Sparrow's a solid boat, and I think that with good decision making, I think I should be able to get around the course. So I think my chances of finishing the course, I would like to think they're greater than 50%. As far as going solo nonstop, it's really hard to answer that. But I think that's one of the cool things about something like this is that, I guess in my mind, an adventure is when you go into something and you don't know what the outcome's going to be. Yeah. And when you go for a solo nonstop lap, you really have no idea what the outcome's going to be. So yeah, man, I don't know, 50% maybe. So we'll see.
Right. I used to be on a team of, we would take really crappy cars and we race them at tracks like, Laguna Seca, Daytona, that kind of thing. And we built this badass car to be fast and everything else. And I swear to God, it'd be a 3-cent part that would always do us in. And we'd have to go take the transmission apart. And it's all endurance racing, right? And so you'd spend 4 hours rebuilding your transmission. And we'd come in like, 95th. Be the fastest car. We come in 95th. And some sob. It would just go super slow around the track the whole day. It would beat us all the time. And so it was like we never could learn the lesson of just like not, just having every system work. And you're right. Like it could be the silliest thing on some part. You're like, yep, didn't even think of that, and it can really be anything. So good luck to you as far as those things go, because I know it's frustrating to think you've shook out every single thing. And then pre-race, you're like, needs and wants and having to sort that out. Like, I really want to do that, but there is just no more time left, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to be as ready as we can, but like you said, you never know. It could be a 50-cent part. Although I think a 50-cent part on a Lemons car is still like $40 on an open 50.
Yeah.
But it could.
Yeah, it is.
It's like a bolt is like $20 on this boat. I mean, it could be. Yeah, you never know what's going to fail. Like I said, the good thing about Sparrow is she's a proven boat. She's done 2 solo around the world races. She's been pretty thoroughly like shaken down as far as the boat itself. So the rest of it is just the systems. It's the things that you attach to it, the rigging, the sails, the the electronics, the autopilot, etc. But the boat itself, I think she's a pretty solid boat, and it's a pretty cool design. And I really want to say the boat is gonna treat me pretty well if I treat it pretty well. So, and again, another part with this as well is my ultimate goal is to go to the Vendée Globe, and I think for me it's very important to get around the world and tell a good story and connect with the American public. So, and try to find a real sponsor for the Vendée Globe. So, with that, I'm going to be sailing most of the time, definitely attempting to get around the racetrack without getting myself into too much trouble. And that basically means sailing pretty conservatively and pretty pragmatically. This isn't going to be the race where you're going to win it because you kept the kite up longer and kept the kite up in 35 knots at night. Like that's not the program at all. So, and furthermore, I've talked to pretty much like all the American around the world racers. I've definitely like had some kind of dialogue with, and all the Class 40 guys and Bruce Schwab and Rich Wilson, the IMOCA guys, and they all tell me the same thing. And it's just like, sail the boat conservatively, go after a consistent high average, and just try to stay out of really, really bad weather. You know what I mean? So routing myself a bit conservatively, and again, just focusing on the average speed and just keeping the ships moving in the right direction and not breaking stuff. So I think I'm pretty good at that as far as just making good decisions and sailing cautiously. So, yeah, now we just have to go do it. When I did my 2,000 mile qualifier in mid and late June, when I did that, when I also did like another 1,000 miles of solo sailing earlier this year, we had like no problems at all, no dramas, just kind of conservatively sailing around, but still putting up spinnakers and code zeros and all that, and just really learning the boat and trying not to break anything. And typically we've been pretty good at that. So I feel like I've had 5,000 miles total on the boat and 3,000 single-handed. We're about to go across the Atlantic, and we really haven't like broken anything sailing. You know what I mean? So I think we're gonna be pretty good, and I think we're gonna. Yeah, I think we'll get around. So I'm pretty confident of that.
Yeah, that's good. Like the lemons reference is huge here because, we would drive the car, hand it off to the next driver. And I always wanted to bring it back with the most car left that I could, right? Like, hey, all 5 gears still work. Because you could drive that thing in fourth gear the entire time. But I didn't want to force anybody to have to do that, right? And other guys get in and they have a different philosophy and they drive hard and fast. And they're like, hey, there's only 2 gears left, like, yeah, like, and there's no brakes. You're like, all right, we don't need brakes. We'll just coast into each, and so you're right. Like finding that sweet spot of being efficient and having some boat left when you get to the next, marker and you make that turn or whatever it is. It's a real smart approach.
Yeah. I mean, this is like a race like this is, I think, even more so than the Vendée Globe. A more Corinthian race like the Global Solo Challenge is. I think it's like it's the ethos of that statement of, to finish first, you must first finish. And I think that that's going to be the hard part of this race is finishing nonstop. And I think that if you sail a relatively clean lap and finish nonstop in this race, I think you're going to do really well. So I think you look at the Golden Globe race, like the other sort of more Corinthian round the world races, the level of professionalism and undoubtedly preparation and experience is nowhere near that of the Vendée Globe. So in the Vendée Globe, those guys are sailing like flawless laps around the world, and the first 5 boats are finishing within, a day or so. So, I mean, you've got to be pushing the whole way to get a reasonable finish. But then you look at the Golden Globe race, and in my opinion, probably a race like this, and you really see a very small number of boats that will be finishing nonstop. And I think that if you do, again, if you sail just a clean lap around the world without stopping, I think you're going to do really well in this race. So that's definitely the goal. It's just like you said, keep the boat in one piece or keep the car in one piece, and that's definitely the goal. So you're going to find yourself again, I think, pretty throttled back a lot of times because it's not the boat that has the extra 0.3 of a knot of boat speed that's going to win, in my opinion.
Yeah. Jerome, do you have any more questions at all? I don't want to keep either one of you guys too long. We're almost at an hour right now. So,
Hey, I got
no, not really.
I got-
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I got plenty of time. I just showed up 45 minutes late. So
That's right. Like I said, very, very excusable, man. I know exactly the position you're in where all the pressure's on, because the minute you leave, well, even though you're still just going to Spain, but it is, I mean, your last little bit on land for a transatlantic is no joke. So I just want to wish you good luck and take care. I'll definitely be following you, and I'll share the story out as much as I can with all the people that follow some of my stuff. But
tell everybody how to follow you on the race so they can keep track of you and communicate.
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple ways. There is a Yellow Brick app. So the Yellow Brick app, you'll be able to download the Yellow Brick app, and then you'll search for the Global Solo Challenge, and you'll be able to follow on that, and you'll be able to follow the tracker. That goes live really, really soon, because the first boat starts the race in just a couple of days. The first boat to start is going to be an SNS 34, the slowest boat in the race. And that gentleman is from Wales, and so he has just sailed to the start in Spain, and he'll be starting on August 26th. So you'll be able to follow the Yellow Brick starting August 26th. Again, my fleet starts on October 28th, so still a couple of months before we go. And then I'm pretty active on Instagram, which is CaptainRon_official. And then my website, which is RonnieSimpsonRacing.com. And then also Facebook, you can do Ronnie Simpson Racing. We have YouTube, Ronnie Simpson Racing, and I've got Starlink on the boat, so I'll be sending out quite a bit of content from out at sea as well. So in theory, we should be able to have, pretty good media content most of the way. So
yeah, pretty easy to find Ronnie out there on all your favorite social media things. And also you can find Jerome as well here, let me put it up here instead of talking about it. I'll just pop it in up here. Jerome, any last questions before I wrap this thing up, or any last thoughts or comments?
Not really. Just, I spent 4.5 months trying to get around the Southern Ocean. That place is going to test you beyond any limits you ever thought you had. And just keep that head on straight. I did a lot of projecting myself to that finish line and projecting myself into the South Atlantic to get through some of those really tough times. But you're going to be amazed at what you're capable of. And as long as you just keep it together, man, you'll get around that, back around Cape Horn and into the Atlantic safely. I wish you luck, my friend.
Right on. Well, I can't wait to find out. Thanks again, man. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Take care, fellas. I'm going to roll the credits. You guys have a great weekend. Everybody stay safe. Watch out for this crazy hurricane in California, everybody. It's going to be crazy.
All right, guys. Thanks again.
All right.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.